Have you ever wondered if the person who could change your entire life might already be standing right in front of you, and you just haven't seen them yet? I pulled into the driveway of my house in Bellevue, Washington, at 7:30 on a Friday evening, and I remember thinking that the sunset over Lake Washington had never looked so indifferent. The orange and pink streaks across the sky seemed to mock me, as if nature itself was reminding me that beauty still existed in the world, while I felt like I was drowning in grey. My name is Nathan Caldwell, and at 42 years old, I had accomplished everything most men dream of. I was the CEO of Caldwell Technologies, a software company I had built from nothing in a cramped Seattle apartment 20 years ago. We had just closed the biggest deal in our company's history, a partnership with one of the largest tech firms in Asia that would bring in over $200 million in the next 3 years. My team had thrown a celebration at the office, champagne corks popping, congratulations echoing through the corridors. Everyone expected me to be elated. Instead, I felt hollow. Because 2 years, 3 months, and 17 days ago, my wife Caroline had died in a car accident on Interstate 90, and no amount of money, no deal, no success could fill the void she had left behind. I sat in my car for a few minutes before going inside, just staring at the house. It was a beautiful home, 6,000 square feet of modern architecture with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Caroline and I had designed it together, picking out every detail from the stone countertops to the wide plank oak floors. We had argued about the color of the front door for 3 weeks, she wanting a bold red and me preferring something more conservative. She won. Of course, she always won. And now that red door looked like a wound, a reminder of every small battle I had lost to her and how much I missed losing. Now the house felt like a museum dedicated to a life that no longer existed. My children were inside. Oliver, who was 11, and Sophie, who was 7. They were the only reason I got out of bed every morning. They were also the reason I felt like the worst father in the world, because I knew I wasn't giving them what they needed. I was present physically, but absent in every way that mattered. I went through the motions, said the right words, showed up at school events, but I wasn't really there. I was a ghost wearing a businessman's suit, haunting my own life. I thought about the day Caroline died all the time, even when I tried not to. She had been driving home from her sister's house in Spokane. It was a Sunday afternoon, clear weather, no reason for anything to go wrong. But a truck driver had fallen asleep at the wheel, crossed the median, and that was it. 22 years of memories, 15 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, and a future that was supposed to stretch out forever. All of it ended in a single moment of someone else's exhaustion. I didn't blame the truck driver. I tried to at first, thinking that anger might be easier than grief. But the man had a family too. He had been working triple shifts to pay for his daughter's medical bills. He hadn't meant for any of it to happen. In the end, there was no one to blame, no villain to hate, just a random tragedy that had torn my world apart. I finally got out of the car and walked to the front door. The house was unusually quiet, which made me pause. Normally, by this time, I would hear the television or Oliver's video games or Sophie's high-pitched voice demanding attention. But tonight, there was only silence. And for a brief moment, panic gripped my chest. In the aftermath of Caroline's death, silence had become my enemy. It was too much like the silence of her absence, the silence of her side of the bed, the silence of the house without her laughter echoing through the rooms. Then I heard something else, laughter. My children's laughter, genuine and full and coming from somewhere deep in the house. I couldn't remember the last time I had heard them laugh like that. Really laugh, not the polite chuckles they offered at school events or the forced giggles when relatives tried to cheer them up. This was real, unguarded joy, and the sound of it stopped me in my tracks. I followed the sound through the foyer, past the living room with its carefully arranged furniture that no one sat on, past the dining room where we never ate meals together anymore, and toward the kitchen at the back of the house. And what I saw when I turned the corner made me question whether I had somehow walked into the wrong house. My kitchen, my pristine, magazine-worthy kitchen that our housekeeper kept immaculate, looked like a bomb had gone off. There was flour everywhere. On the counters, on the floor, on the cabinets, even on the ceiling somehow. Eggshells littered the island, chocolate smeared across the refrigerator door. A puddle of something sticky spread across the marble countertop, and in the middle of this disaster were my 2 children and Maria Santos, the housekeeper I had hired 4 months ago. Maria was 34 years old, with dark curly hair that was currently dusted white with flour. She had olive skin, warm brown eyes, and a smile that I had never really noticed before that moment. She was wearing an apron over her simple clothes, a practical outfit of jeans and a button-down shirt, and she was laughing so hard that tears were streaming down her flour-covered cheeks. Oliver had what appeared to be cake batter dripping from his hair. At 11, he was usually so serious, so guarded, trying to be the man of the house since his mother died. But right now he looked like a child, carefree and silly, and completely covered in chocolate. Sophie had chocolate on her nose, and her chin and possibly in her ears. Her blonde pigtails, usually so neat, were coming undone and decorated with what looked like sprinkles. They were both laughing too, clutching their stomachs, barely able to stand. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. This was my house. These were my children. And yet I felt like I had walked into someone else's life, a life where joy was possible, where messes were acceptable, where laughter was the soundtrack instead of silence. Maria noticed me first. Her laughter died, and she straightened up, her expression shifting to one of mortification. The transformation was immediate, from carefree to terrified in the space of a heartbeat. She started speaking rapidly, her slight Brazilian accent becoming more pronounced in her nervousness. "Mr. Caldwell, I am so sorry. I will clean everything. The children wanted to bake a cake for you because they knew you had your big meeting today, and I thought it would be nice. And my grandmother always said that baking together builds family bonds. But then the mixer exploded and the eggs fell, and the flour... Well, I don't even know how the flour got on the ceiling. Maybe the bag tore when Oliver was trying to pour it, and I promise I will have this cleaned up before..." "Dad!" Sophie interrupted, running toward me and throwing her chocolate-covered arms around my legs. She was small for her age, delicate and fierce at the same time, a miniature version of her mother in so many ways. "Dad, we made you a cake, or we tried to make you a cake. It's kind of a mess, but Maria says it's the love that matters, not how it looks." Oliver hung back, watching me with those cautious eyes he had developed since his mother died. At 11, he was old enough to remember everything about Caroline, old enough to carry his grief like a weight on his small shoulders. He remembered bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes and the way she would dance in the kitchen while making dinner. He had become protective of Sophie, protective of me, trying to be the man of the house when he was still just a boy. The fear in his eyes now broke my heart. He was clearly expecting me to be angry, expecting punishment, expecting disappointment. "We wanted to celebrate your deal," Oliver said quietly, his voice uncertain. "Maria told us it was important. She said you've been working really hard, and you deserved something special." I looked at Maria, who was wringing her hands, clearly expecting me to be furious. She had already grabbed a towel and was trying to discreetly wipe some flour off the counter, as if she could somehow clean up the disaster before I fully processed it. And the old me, the me from 2 years ago, might have been irritated that Nathan would have seen the mess, the chaos, the disruption to the perfect order of his home, and he would have made polite but firm comments about boundaries and expectations, that Nathan would have thanked them stiffly for the thought while making it clear that this kind of thing was not acceptable. But something shifted in that moment. Something cracked open in my chest, a fissure in the wall I had built around my heart. I realized that this mess, this beautiful, chaotic, flour-covered mess, was the first sign of life this house had seen in over 2 years. This was what living looked like. This was what family looked like. This was everything I had been missing, everything I had forgotten how to create. I started to laugh. It surprised everyone, including me. It was a rusty sound, like a machine that hadn't been used in too long, creaking and groaning as it tried to remember how to work. But once it started, I couldn't stop. I laughed until my eyes watered, until I had to lean against the doorframe for support, until Sophie and Oliver started laughing again too, and Maria's worried expression slowly transformed into a cautious, tentative smile. "The flour," I managed to say, pointing at the ceiling where a patch of white powder clung impossibly to the smooth surface. "How did you get flour on the ceiling?" Maria's cheeks flushed a deeper shade beneath the flour already coating them. Oliver was showing Sophie how the mixer works, and I think the speed was perhaps too high, and the flour bag was not properly secured, and there was a moment of enthusiasm. Enthusiasm? I repeated, still laughing. That's one word for it. I walked into the kitchen, flour crunching under my expensive Italian leather shoes that I had bought for the very meeting I was supposed to be celebrating. I didn't care. I pulled both of my children into a hug, breathing in the smell of chocolate and flour and the particular sweetness that belonged only to them. I couldn't remember the last time I had done that, just spontaneously hugged them for no reason other than love. I had become so afraid of feeling anything that I had stopped expressing the emotions that mattered most. They felt small and warm and alive in my arms, and Sophie's chocolate-covered hands left prints on the back of my suit jacket that I didn't care about at all. Oliver was stiff at first, uncertain, but then he relaxed into the hug, and I felt his small body tremble with something that might have been relief. "Let's see this cake," I said. Maria hesitantly retrieved a glass pan from the counter, holding it out like a peace offering. Inside was something that might generously be called a cake. It was lopsided, sunken in the middle, like a small volcano that had collapsed on itself. It was covered in what appeared to be an avalanche of chocolate frosting that was sliding off one side in slow motion, pooling on the plate beneath. The words, "Congrats, Dad," were written on top in shaky letters, the S backwards, the letters crooked and uneven. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "You made this for me?" I asked, my voice suddenly thick with emotion I hadn't felt in months. "Maria helped us," Sophie said proudly. "She said when she was little in Brazil, her grandmother always said that cooking is how you show people you love them. Cooking is—" She scrunched up her face, trying to remember the word. "Amor na pratica. That means love in action. So we wanted to show you, Dad. We wanted you to know." I looked at Maria. Really looked at her for the first time since I'd hired her. When she had come for the interview 4 months ago, I had barely paid attention. My assistant had handled most of the hiring process. I needed someone to clean the house, do the laundry, keep things running while I buried myself in work. She had come highly recommended by a colleague whose wife had employed her previously. Her references were impeccable, her English was excellent, and she had seemed competent and professional. That was all I required. I didn't care about her story or her life or her dreams. I just needed someone to maintain the shell of a home I was living in. Now I saw her differently. I saw the woman who had taught my children to cook, who had told them stories about her grandmother in Brazil and the wisdom that gets passed down through generations, who had helped them plan a surprise for a father they barely saw anymore, who had turned my pristine, sterile house into a place where flour could end up on the ceiling and it was considered a victory rather than a disaster, who had given my children permission to be messy, to be loud, to be alive. "Thank you, Maria," I said, and I meant it more than I had meant anything in a long time. She nodded, still looking uncertain, as if she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I will clean this up right away, Mr. Caldwell. I apologize again for the mess. It will not happen again." "No," I said, surprising myself. "Not yet. First, we're going to eat this cake." Oliver's eyes went wide, his serious face breaking into something close to wonder. "Really? Really, go wash your hands, both of you, and find some plates. We're celebrating." The children scrambled out of the kitchen, their feet slipping on the flour-covered floor, leaving trails of white footprints like snow in July. I was left alone with Maria, who was staring at me like I had grown a second head. "You are not angry?" she asked, her accent thickening with disbelief. "No, I'm not angry, I searched for the right word, sifting through a vocabulary that had become limited to business terms and polite platitudes. "I'm grateful. I haven't seen my children that happy in a very long time. I haven't heard them laugh like that since—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Maria's expression softened, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes that looked like recognition. "They are good children, Mr. Caldwell. They miss their mother very much. But they also miss their father." The words landed like a punch to the gut, mostly because I knew they were true. I had been so lost in my own grief that I hadn't noticed my children slipping away from me. I had been present, but not available, there, but not really there. I had outsourced their care to nannies and housekeepers and after-school programs, telling myself it was necessary, telling myself I was providing for them, when really I was just hiding. "How long have you known?" I asked quietly. "Known what?" "That I've been failing them." Maria was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. She wiped her hands on her apron, a nervous gesture, and then met my eyes directly. "You are not failing them. You are grieving. But grief, it can become a wall if we let it. And children, they cannot climb walls by themselves. They need someone to lift them over." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. The children came running back into the kitchen, their hands still slightly damp, their faces eager. Sophie was bouncing on her heels with excitement, and even Oliver looked lighter than he had in months. I cut into the lopsided cake, while Maria tried to discreetly wipe flour off the counter. The cake was terrible. The batter was undercooked in the middle, still gooey and wet. The frosting was too sweet, probably double the amount the recipe called for. And there was something crunchy in there that I suspected was eggshell. Or possibly the sprinkles that had somehow gotten mixed into the batter instead of staying on top. I ate 3 pieces. After the children went to bed, Sophie passed out almost immediately after the sugar crash hit, and Oliver read for an hour before his light went off. I stayed up late, helping Maria clean the kitchen. She tried to protest, insisting it was her job, that I was paying her to do this work, and she didn't want to take advantage of my generosity. "Please," I said, grabbing a mop. "Let me help." We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the scraping of flour from various surfaces and the splash of water in the bucket. It was strangely meditative, this simple physical labor. I couldn't remember the last time I had cleaned anything. At work, everything was handled by staff. At home, Maria and occasionally other hired help took care of everything. But there was something satisfying about watching the white flour disappear, about restoring order from chaos. "Where in Brazil are you from?" I asked eventually, more to break the silence than out of genuine curiosity. But as soon as I asked, I realized I actually wanted to know. I was tired of not knowing, tired of living surrounded by people I never bothered to see. "São Paulo," she said, scrubbing at a stubborn patch of chocolate on the refrigerator door. "I came to the United States 10 years ago. My husband was offered a job here, a good opportunity in technology, so we moved. He worked in the industry. Actually, maybe you knew him. The industry is small here in Seattle. David Santos." The name was familiar, swimming up from the depths of my memory. "David Santos from Venture Dynamics?" Maria nodded, and her expression flickered with something I recognized all too well. It was the look of someone who had lost something precious. Someone who had learned that the world could shatter in an instant and never quite reassemble itself properly. "Yes. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack, very sudden. He was only 41. He went to work one morning, same as always, kissed me goodbye, told Lucia he would be home for dinner, and then—" She shrugged, a small, helpless gesture. "And then I was a widow." I stopped mopping. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "Why would you? We were not close, but yes, I understand your children's pain. My daughter, Lucia, she was 12 when David died. She is 15 now. It has not been easy." "You have a daughter?" "Yes. She lives with me in the small apartment in Kirkland. She's a good girl, very smart, top of her class. She wants to be a doctor someday, a surgeon. Her father would be so proud." Maria smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "She is the reason I work so hard. Everything I do is for her future." I felt ashamed that I had employed this woman for 4 months and knew nothing about her life. I had treated her like a piece of furniture, useful and necessary, but not worthy of attention or interest. She had cooked for my children, cleaned my house, done my laundry, and I had never once asked if she had a family of her own, a story of her own, dreams and fears and hopes that had nothing to do with my dirty dishes. "I should pay you more," I said suddenly, the words coming out before I could think about whether they were appropriate. Maria laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh that transformed her face. That is a strange response to hearing about my dead husband. I just meant— I fumbled with my words, feeling stupid and exposed. You do a lot for us, for my family, and I haven't appreciated it. I've been so wrapped up in my own grief that I forgot other people have grief too. I'm sorry. She studied me for a moment, her head tilted slightly, as if she was seeing something new. You are different tonight, Mr. Caldwell. Call me Nathan, and I don't know if I'm different. I think maybe I'm just finally waking up. Maria smiled, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to something closer to beautiful. There was warmth in her smile, and understanding, and something that looked almost like hope. Then welcome back to the land of the living, Nathan. Over the following weeks, I found myself looking forward to coming home in a way I hadn't since Caroline died. It wasn't that the grief was gone, because grief doesn't work that way. It doesn't disappear or fade or resolve itself neatly. It's more like a river that carves new channels through your life, finding different paths around the obstacles you put in its way. The grief had shifted, moved from the center of my chest to somewhere off to the side, still present, but no longer blocking my view of everything else. Maria had a gift for making our house feel like a home. She didn't do anything dramatic. It was all small things that accumulated into something greater than their sum. She started leaving fresh flowers in the kitchen, bright yellow sunflowers that Sophie adored and that reminded me, unexpectedly, of Caroline's garden that had died from neglect after she passed. She convinced Oliver to help her cook dinner a few nights a week, teaching him basic recipes from her grandmother's collection. Simple things like rice and beans and empanadas that made the house smell like warmth and welcome. She played Brazilian music while she cleaned, soft melodies that filled the empty spaces where silence used to live. Songs about love and loss and longing, about the inevitable sadness of life and the stubborn persistence of hope. I didn't understand the Portuguese lyrics, but I understood the emotion behind them. It was the same emotion that lived in my chest, the feeling of loving something that was no longer there. I started coming home earlier. At first, I told myself it was for the children, that I wanted to spend more time with Oliver and Sophie, to be the father they deserved instead of the ghost I had become. And that was true. But it was also true that I wanted to see Maria, to hear about her day, to watch her interact with my children with a warmth and patience that I seemed to have forgotten how to offer. I found excuses to talk to her. I would ask about recipes she was making, about Lucia's school activities, about her life in Brazil before she came to America. Each conversation revealed new facets of her personality, like light refracting through a crystal to show colors you didn't know were there. She was funny in a dry, understated way. She was fiercely intelligent, with opinions about politics and economics and social issues that surprised me. She was deeply loyal to her daughter, sacrificing everything for Lucia's future without ever framing it as sacrifice. One evening in late April, about 2 months after the cake disaster, I came home to find Maria sitting on the back patio with a cup of tea, watching the sunset over the lake. The children were at their weekly activities, Oliver at his coding class at the community center, Sophie at ballet, and the house was quiet in a way that felt peaceful rather than empty. Maria startled when she heard me approach, nearly spilling her tea, and immediately moved to stand up. Mr. Caldwell, I mean Nathan, I'm sorry, I was just taking a short break before starting dinner. I should be working, Maria, I interrupted gently. You're allowed to take breaks. You're not a robot. She relaxed slightly, settling back into her chair, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. The ingrained habit of never wanting to be caught doing anything that might seem like shirking. I know, but I feel guilty sitting while there is work to be done. My mother always said idle hands invite the devil. She had many sayings like that. There's always work to be done. That's not a reason to never rest. I sat down in the chair beside her, loosening my tie and letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Mind if I join you? Of course not. It is your house. It's your tea time. I'm the intruder here. She smiled at that, a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the colors shift over the water. The lake was calm, reflecting the orange and pink sky like a mirror. A couple of kayakers paddled past in the distance, their silhouettes dark against the fading light. A heron stood motionless at the water's edge, waiting for fish with infinite patience. "It's beautiful here," Maria said quietly. "When I first came to this house, I thought it was too big, too fancy, like a museum. But now, sitting here, watching this..." She gestured at the sunset. "I understand why you chose this place." "Caroline chose it," I said, the words coming out before I could decide whether to say them. "She grew up in Seattle, and she always loved the water. She used to say that living near water made her feel like anything was possible, like the horizon was always calling her to something new. She sounds like a dreamer." She was the dreamer and I was the pragmatist. She would come up with wild ideas and I would figure out how to make them real. It was a good partnership. I paused, surprised at how easy it was to talk about Caroline with Maria. Usually, any mention of my wife felt like pressing on a bruise, painful and best avoided. But this felt different. More like turning the pages of a beloved book, bittersweet but not unbearable. "Can I ask you something personal?" I said eventually. Maria tensed slightly. "You may ask. I may not answer." "Fair enough." I took a breath, organizing my thoughts. "When you lost David, how did you learn to live again, without feeling like you were betraying his memory?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I worried I had overstepped, pushed into territory that was too private, too painful. Then she took a deep breath and answered, her voice thoughtful and slow, as if she was choosing each word with care. "At first, I did not. I felt guilty for everything, for breathing, for eating, for sleeping. Every moment of pleasure felt like a betrayal. If I laughed at something Lucia said, I would immediately think of David and how he would never laugh again. And the guilt would crush me. If I enjoyed a meal, I would think about how he would never taste anything again. If I noticed a beautiful sunset, I would be devastated that he could not see it with me." "Yes," I said softly, "exactly. But then my mother, she came from Brazil to stay with us for a few months after David died. She is a wise woman, my mother. She has lived through many losses, her parents, her husband, 2 of her brothers. She knows grief like an old friend, and she told me something I will never forget." "What did she say?" Maria turned to look at me, her brown eyes serious and warm. "She said that grief is love with nowhere to go, and if I stopped loving life because David was gone, I wasn't honoring his memory. I was wasting the love he gave me." The words hit me hard, like a wave crashing over me when I wasn't expecting it. Grief is love with nowhere to go. I had so much love that had nowhere to go. Love I had poured into Carolyn for 15 years that now just sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and useless and aching. "Your mother sounds wise," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "She is. She also told me that David would want me to be happy, that he did not love me so that I could be miserable for the rest of my life. He loved me so that I could learn what love felt like, and someday maybe share that love with someone else." "He would be angry," she said, "if I spent my whole life mourning him instead of living." "Has that happened?" The question came out before I could stop it, and I immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." Maria looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something complex and guarded, and yet also open. "It has not happened yet. I have been too busy surviving to think about living. Raising Lucia alone, working to pay the bills, trying to save money for her college, dreaming of giving her the opportunities David and I never had. Romance has not been a priority. I understand that. Do you?" She turned to face me more fully, her body angling toward mine in a way that felt significant. "I think perhaps you have the opposite problem. You have all the money in the world, Nathan, but you have forgotten how to live. You come home to this beautiful house and you look around at everything you have built, and you see only what you have lost. You have built a monument to your grief, and you have locked yourself inside it." I should have been offended by her bluntness, by the way she cut through all my defenses with surgical precision. But instead, I felt grateful. No one talked to me like this. My employees were too afraid of losing their jobs. My friends had given up trying to reach me, tired of being pushed away. My family walked on eggshells, treating me like I was made of glass. Maria was the first person in 2 years who had looked at me and told me the truth. You're right, I admitted, the words feeling like a weight lifting from my shoulders. I've been a ghost in my own life, going through the motions, but not really living. Then stop being a ghost. Your children need their father. And you, Nathan, you need to start living again. Not for anyone else's sake, for your own. I looked at her, this woman who had entered my home as a stranger and somehow become the one person who saw me clearly, and I realized that I wanted to know everything about her. Her childhood in São Paulo, the streets she played on, and the schools she attended. Her dreams before David, the life she had imagined for herself when she was young, and the world seemed full of possibility. Her fears after his death, the sleepless nights, and the overwhelming responsibilities. What made her laugh, and what made her cry. What she thought about when she watched the sunset. What she hoped for when she allowed herself to hope. Maria, I started, not even sure what I was going to say, only knowing that I wanted to say something, to bridge the distance between us. But before I could continue, my phone rang. It was Oliver's coding instructor, calling to say that Oliver had gotten into a fight with another student, and I needed to come pick him up immediately. The moment shattered like glass. I apologized to Maria and rushed to the car, my mind already shifting into crisis mode. Oliver had never been in a fight before. He was a quiet, thoughtful boy who preferred computers to confrontation, who solved problems with logic rather than fists. Something must have happened, something significant enough to make him abandon everything he usually believed in. When I arrived at the community center where the coding class was held, I found Oliver sitting on a bench outside, his knuckles raw and his expression defiant. His glasses were askew, and there was a tear in the sleeve of his shirt. A woman I didn't recognize was standing nearby with a boy who had a bloody nose and a developing black eye, and she was shooting daggers at me with her eyes. Mr. Caldwell? The instructor, a young man named Marcus, who wore thick-framed glasses and had the nervous energy of someone who preferred computers to people, approached me with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry to have called you, but we have a strict no-violence policy. Oliver punched Tyler during a group exercise. Oliver, I said, keeping my voice calm despite my shock. What happened? Oliver's jaw was tight, his hands clenched in his lap. When he spoke, his voice was controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath, simmering like water about to boil. He said something about Mom. My blood ran cold. What did he say? He said at least his mom was alive. He said I probably drove mine to death by being a boring computer nerd. He said she probably died just to get away from me. I saw red. For a moment, I wanted to march over to that little Tyler kid and show him what a real punch felt like. I wanted to grab him by his shirt and ask him how he would feel if someone said those things about his mother. But I forced myself to breathe, to remember that I was the adult here, that Oliver needed a father, not a vigilante. I turned to Marcus. Is this true? Did this other boy say that? Marcus shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. I didn't hear the conversation directly. But some of the other students confirmed that Tyler said something about Oliver's mother. There seems to have been some provocation. I looked at the woman, presumably Tyler's mother, who had the decency to look slightly less self-righteous now. Her face had gone pale as she listened to the exchange, and she was gripping her son's shoulder with white-knuckled fingers. Perhaps, I said coldly, my voice like ice, you should teach your son not to mock children who have lost their parents. Perhaps you should explain to him that words have consequences, and that some pain is too deep to be treated as ammunition in a schoolyard argument. The woman opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't wait to hear it. I put my hand on Oliver's shoulder and guided him to the car. We drove in silence for a few minutes, until we were away from the community center and on the quiet streets of our neighborhood, the familiar trees and houses passing by outside the windows. Am I in trouble? Oliver finally asked, his voice small and uncertain, so different from the defiant boy I had seen on the bench. For defending your mother's memory? No. But Oliver, violence isn't the answer. You know that. I know. But he made it sound like she died because of me, like it was my fault, like I was such a bad son that she would rather be dead than be my mom. I pulled the car over to the side of the road. unable to continue driving while my son said things that broke my heart. I turned to face him, and I saw that his eyes were wet with tears he was trying desperately not to shed. At 11 years old, he was trying so hard to be strong, to be the man of the house, to carry burdens no child should have to carry. Oliver, look at me. I waited until his eyes met mine. Your mother's death was not your fault, not even a little bit. It was an accident, a terrible, senseless accident that had nothing to do with you or Sophie or me. It was a truck driver who fell asleep, that's all. Random and awful and completely meaningless. Do you understand? But I should have been there. If I had been in the car with her, then you might have died too, and I would have lost both of you. Oliver, your mother loved you more than anything in this world. She was so proud of you every single day. She used to tell me all the time how impressed she was by how smart you were, how kind, how thoughtful. She would never, ever want you to blame yourself for what happened. The tears finally broke free, streaming down his face. He wasn't sobbing, just leaking tears silently, the way people cry when they've held it in too long and can't anymore. I unbuckled my seatbelt and pulled him into an awkward hug across the center console. He clung to me like he used to when he was small, before grief had made both of us afraid to show emotion. I miss her, Dad, he whispered into my shoulder. I know, buddy. I miss her too. Every single day. Do you think she's watching us, like from heaven or whatever? I thought about the question carefully. Caroline had been spiritual in her own way, believing in something greater even if she didn't subscribe to any particular religion. She used to say that love was the only thing that transcended death, that when people loved each other, they created something that could never be destroyed. I think, I said slowly, that wherever your mom is, she loves us just as much as she did when she was alive. And I think she would want us to be happy, to live our lives, to love each other and take care of each other. Maria says that too, Oliver said, pulling back and wiping his face with his sleeve. She says Mom is in every sunset and every flower and every good thing that happens. She says that's how people who die stay with us, through all the beautiful things they loved when they were alive. Maria said that? Yeah. She talks to me sometimes after school, before you get home. She told me about her husband, how he died too. She gets it, Dad. She knows what it feels like. She doesn't look at me with pity or try to make me feel better with stupid platitudes. She just understands. I sat back in my seat, processing this information. Maria had been quietly helping my son heal, and I had been completely oblivious. While I was hiding in my office, burying myself in work, she had been doing the hard work of parenting that I had abandoned. Do you like Maria? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Oliver shrugged. That universal preteen gesture of not wanting to admit to feelings. She's okay. She's nice to Sophie. She makes good food, and she doesn't treat us like we're broken. What do you mean? Everyone else, like Aunt Patricia and Grandma, they look at us like we're sad little orphans. They whisper when they think we can't hear, and they always ask if we're okay with this look on their face, like they expect us to start crying any second. Maria doesn't do that. She just treats us normal. Like we're regular kids, not tragic victims. I nodded, understanding what he meant, the pitying glances, the hushed conversations, the constant emotional check-ins. They came from a place of love, but they also served as constant reminders of loss. Every concerned question was a reminder that we were damaged, different, marked by tragedy. I'm glad you have someone to talk to, I said. And Oliver, I'm sorry I haven't been there for you the way I should have been. It's okay, Dad. No, it's not, but I'm going to try to do better, starting now. And when we got home, Maria was waiting by the door, her face creased with worry. I had texted her briefly that there was an incident, but that Oliver was fine, but she still looked relieved when she saw us walk up the path, Oliver's tear-stained face and my rumpled suit telling a story she could probably guess. Oliver, she said, crouching down to his level, are you all right? He nodded, then hesitated, then suddenly hugged her. Maria looked startled for a moment, surprised by this show of affection from a boy who usually kept everyone at arm's length. Then she wrapped her arms around him and held him tight, one hand patting his back, murmuring something in Portuguese that I didn't understand, but that sounded like comfort. Thank you, I mouthed to her over Oliver's head. She just smiled. That night, after the children were asleep, I found Maria in the kitchen, preparing food for the next day. She had this habit of always working, always moving, as if she was afraid that stillness would invite unwelcome thoughts. I recognized it because I had the same habit, filling every moment with activity so there was no space for grief to seep in. "Maria, can we talk?" She looked up, surprised, wiping her hands on a towel. "Of course." I sat down at the kitchen island, watching her hands as she returned to chopping vegetables. There was something meditative about her movements, the rhythmic sound of the knife against the cutting board, the careful way she organized everything into neat piles. "Oliver told me that you've been talking to him. About your husband, about grief." She paused her chopping, the knife hovering in midair. "I hope that was all right. I did not want to overstep, but he seemed so lost, so alone with his feelings. And I remember what that was like after David died. I remember feeling like no one understood. It's more than all right, it's wonderful. He opened up to me today in a way he hasn't in 2 years. Because of you." Maria resumed chopping, but I could see a faint blush creeping up her cheeks. "I only shared my own experience. I know what it is like to lose someone you love. Sometimes it helps to know you are not alone, that others have walked the same path and survived it." "It does, Maria. I've been thinking about what you said on the patio that day, about living again." She set down the knife and turned to face me fully. Her expression was guarded but curious, her brown eyes searching mine for something I wasn't sure I could name. "I've been dead inside for 2 years, I continued, the words coming easier than I expected. "I've been going through the motions, running my company, providing for my children, but I haven't actually been living. I've been existing, not living. And then you came along with your flower explosions and your sunflowers and your stories about Brazil, and something started to change. Something woke up inside me." "Nathan, wait, let me finish. I don't know what this is. I don't know what I'm feeling. It's confusing and scary and nothing like what I expected. All I know is that when I come home now, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. I feel hopeful, and I think that's because of you." Maria was quiet for a long moment, processing what I had said. Then she walked around the island and sat on the stool beside me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral that reminded me of summer gardens. "I feel it too," she said softly. "But Nathan, we need to be careful. I am your employee. You are grieving. Your children are vulnerable. This situation, it is complicated. I know. I'm not suggesting we do anything impulsive. I'm just being honest with you about where I am. Because you've been honest with me, and I think you deserve the same." She nodded slowly. "Then let us take it slowly. Let us see where this goes without pressure, without expectations. And if it becomes something more, we will navigate that together." "That sounds reasonable," Maria smiled, that warm, transformative smile that I was coming to love. "You are a good man, Nathan Caldwell. I think maybe you have just forgotten." "I'm starting to remember." The weeks that followed were some of the best I had experienced since Caroline's death. Maria and I didn't rush into anything. We simply spent time together, getting to know each other in ways that went beyond employer and employee, beyond the transactional relationship I had assumed was all we would ever have. I met her daughter, Lucia, a brilliant, ambitious teenager who reminded me so much of Maria that it was almost unsettling. She had her mother's dark hair and intelligent eyes, but there was something fiercer in her, a determination that bordered on intensity. She was skeptical of me at first, protective of her mother, asking pointed questions about my intentions that made me feel like I was being interviewed for a job I desperately wanted. "My mother has had enough hardship in her life," Lucia said during one of our early meetings, her gaze unwavering. "She doesn't need some rich guy playing games with her heart." "I'm not playing games," I assured her. "I care about your mother, and I would never do anything to hurt her." "People say a lot of things they don't mean." "I know, but I mean this." She studied me for a long moment, this 15-year-old girl who had been forced to grow up too fast, who had watched her mother struggle and sacrifice and survive. Whatever she saw in my face must have satisfied her, because she finally nodded. "Okay, But if you hurt her, I know a lot about chemistry. And some of those chemicals can do very bad things to a person's car. I laughed despite myself. Duly noted. Over time, Lucia warmed up to me, especially when she saw how Oliver and Sophie interacted with Maria. The children took to each other almost immediately, Oliver and Lucia bonding over their shared interest in science and their shared experience of losing a parent. They would sit together at the kitchen table, Lucia helping Oliver with his homework, the two of them debating scientific theories I barely understood. Sophie, in particular, had attached herself to Maria like a barnacle. She wanted Maria to do her hair in the mornings, to help her with homework in the afternoons, to read her bedtime stories at night. She followed Maria around the house like a shadow, asking questions about Brazil and cooking and what it was like to be a grown-up. At first, I felt a pang of guilt watching it, wondering if I was somehow betraying Caroline's memory by allowing another woman to take on a maternal role. But then I remembered what Maria had said. Grief is love with nowhere to go. Maybe the love Sophie needed to give didn't diminish what she felt for her mother. Maybe the heart was capable of expanding, of holding multiple loves at once. One Saturday in early June, I proposed a family outing. Not just our family, but Maria and Lucia as well. Let's do something together, I said. All of us. Like a family. Maria hesitated. Are you sure? People will see us together. They will talk. Let them talk. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending. Let's just be together in public like normal people. We went to Pike Place Market in Seattle, wandering through the stalls of fresh fish and flowers and artisan crafts. The market was crowded and chaotic, vendors shouting prices, tourists snapping photos, the smell of coffee and seafood and fresh bread mixing in the air. Sophie held Lucia's hand, asking a million questions about everything she saw. Oliver walked beside Maria, surprisingly chatty for a boy who usually kept to himself, pointing out interesting items and explaining the history of the market that he had learned in school. I hung back with Maria at one point, watching our blended group navigate the crowded market. Look at them, I said. They look like a family. Maria squeezed my arm. They are becoming one, I think. That evening, we all had dinner together at a seafood restaurant on the waterfront. The sun was setting over Elliott Bay, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, boats bobbing gently in the harbor. Lucia told stories about her plans for medical school, her eyes lighting up as she described the surgeries she wanted to perform someday. Oliver showed her some of the coding projects he had been working on, a game he was developing that featured a character who could control time. Sophie ate crab cakes and declared them the best thing she had ever tasted. I watched Maria laugh at something Oliver said, her eyes crinkling at the corners, her whole face transformed by joy. And I felt something I thought I had lost forever. I felt happy, not the hollow, temporary happiness of closing a business deal or receiving an award. This was something deeper, something that came from connection and belonging, from watching people I loved enjoy each other's company. This was the happiness I had forgotten existed. Nathan, Maria said later, as we walked along the pier while the children ran ahead, their laughter echoing off the water. I need to tell you something. My heart sank. That phrase never preceded good news. In my experience, I need to tell you something was always followed by something difficult, something painful, something that would change everything. I received a job offer, she continued, in California, a wealthy family in San Francisco. They saw my references, and they want to hire me. They have 3 children and an estate in Pacific Heights. The pay is almost double what you pay me. And Lucia could attend one of the best high schools in the country. They offered to pay for her tuition. I stopped walking. When did this happen? Last week. I have been trying to find the right time to tell you, but there never seemed to be a right time. Are you going to take it? Maria looked at me, her expression torn, conflicting emotions playing across her face like clouds across the sun. I don't know. My head says I should. It would be better for Lucia, better for our future. The money would mean security, stability, a chance for Lucia to attend a top university without student loans. My head says This is the responsible thing to do. But my heart. She trailed off, looking out at the water. Your heart. She reached out and took my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. My heart is here, Nathan. With you. With Oliver and Sophie. With this life we have been building together. When I think about leaving, I feel like I would be leaving part of myself behind. Then stay. It is not that simple. Yes, it is. I stepped closer to her, cupping her face in my hands. Her skin was soft beneath my palms, and I could feel her pulse racing. Maria, I know it's only been a few months. I know there are 100 reasons why this is complicated. The employer-employee thing, the kids, the grief we're both still carrying, I know all of that. But I am falling in love with you, and I don't want to lose you. Her eyes glistened with tears. Nathan, I will double whatever they're offering, triple it. I don't care about the money. I care about you. I care about Lucia. I care about this family we're building together. This is not about money. I know, but if money is an obstacle, let me remove it. Let me show you that I am serious about this, about us. I will pay for Lucia's school, for her college, for medical school, whatever she needs. Not because I'm trying to buy you, but because I want to invest in our future together. She was quiet for a long moment, searching my face for something. I didn't know what she was looking for. Sincerity, maybe, or certainty, or some sign that I meant what I was saying. Whatever she found must have satisfied her, because she slowly smiled. You would really pay me triple just to stay? I would pay you anything. I would give you anything. Maria, you brought my children back to life. You brought me back to life. That's worth more than any amount of money. Then I will stay, she whispered. Not for the money, for you, for us, for this family we are becoming. I kissed her there on the pier, with the Seattle skyline glowing behind us and the sound of our children's laughter echoing in the distance. It was our first kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. Her lips were warm against mine, and she tasted like the wine we had with dinner, fruity and complex. When we pulled apart, I felt like something fundamental had shifted, like a key turning in a lock, opening a door to a future I hadn't dared to imagine. I knew it! Sophie shrieked. I spun around to find Sophie standing a few feet away, watching us with a huge grin on her face. Her pigtails were coming loose, and there was ice cream on her chin from the cone she was holding. I knew you liked Maria! Oliver owes me $5! I laughed, embarrassed but not sorry. You were betting on this? Obviously, Sophie said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Maria is the best. Of course you would fall in love with her. I told Oliver it would happen before summer, but he said you were too sad to notice how pretty she is. I said love would find a way. Lucia appeared beside Sophie, her expression more cautious. Mom, are you and Mr. Caldwell? Maria walked over to her daughter and took her hands. We are seeing where things go, mija. Is that all right with you? Lucia looked at me, then at her mother, then at Oliver and Sophie. A slow smile spread across her face, replacing the wariness that had been there moments before. I think Dad would be happy, she said finally. He always wanted you to find someone who made you smile like that. He used to say your smile was the most beautiful thing in the world, and he hated that it disappeared after he died. Maria pulled her daughter into a hug, and I pulled my children into mine, and for a moment, we were two families standing on a pier, slowly becoming one. The sunset painted us all in gold, and the water lapped gently against the pilings, and somewhere in the distance, a ferry horn sounded, heading toward new horizons. The summer passed in a blur of happiness. Maria moved into the guest house on our property, which gave us privacy while still allowing us to spend time together. It was a small but comfortable space, and she and Lucia made it their own, filling it with plants and photographs and the soft music that Maria played while she cooked. Lucia enrolled in Oliver's school, and the two of them developed an unexpected friendship that went beyond shared circumstances. They studied together, argued about science and philosophy, introduced each other to their favorite books and movies. Oliver started coming out of his shell, becoming more confident, more willing to engage with the world. Lucia, in turn, softened some of her hard edges, learning that not everyone would disappoint her. There were challenges, of course. There always are. My mother, Caroline's biggest advocate, was skeptical of Maria at first. She came to visit in July, arriving with sharp eyes and sharper questions, prepared to disapprove of this woman who had seemingly replaced her beloved daughter-in-law. She spent the first day watching Maria with narrowed eyes, analyzing her every word and gesture, looking for evidence that she was somehow unworthy or manipulative. She asked pointed questions about Maria's past, her education, her intentions. She made subtle comments about how quickly I seemed to have moved on. But by the end of the week, even she had to admit that Maria was good for us. She saw how Oliver smiled more, how Sophie laughed more, how I seemed more present and engaged than I had been since Caroline's death. "She's not trying to replace Caroline," my mother said on her last night, as we sat on the patio watching Maria chase Sophie around the yard. Sophie's laughter echoed off the water, and Maria's curly hair flew behind her as she ran, making exaggerated monster noises. "She's creating something new, and I think Caroline would approve." "You do?" "Caroline loved you, Nathan. She would want you to be happy, and I haven't seen you this happy in years. She's not erasing what you had with Caroline. She's building something alongside it." I thought about that a lot in the weeks that followed. Was it possible to honor Caroline's memory while also building a new life with Maria? Could I love two women at once, one in the past and one in the present? The answer, I realized, was yes. Love wasn't a finite resource. It wasn't a pie that had to be divided into smaller and smaller pieces, each new love diminishing the others. It was more like a river, constantly flowing, capable of branching into multiple streams while still remaining whole. My love for Caroline didn't disappear because I loved Maria. It just found a different place to live, transforming from active, present-tense love to memory, legacy, foundation. On a crisp October evening, nearly a year after the flower incident that had started everything, I took Maria to the place where Caroline was buried. It was the first time I had brought anyone there besides the children. The cemetery was peaceful, rows of headstones stretching across manicured lawns, ancient oak trees providing shade and solemnity. Caroline's grave was in a quiet corner, overlooking a small pond where ducks sometimes gathered. I had chosen the spot because she loved nature, loved water, loved quiet places where she could think. "Are you sure you want me here?" Maria asked, her voice hesitant. She hung back slightly, uncertain of her place in this sacred space. "Yes. I want you to know all of me, Maria. Including this part, including her. She was part of my life for 15 years. She gave me my children. She made me the man I am. I need you to know her, even if only through memory." We walked together to the headstone, our footsteps crunching on the fallen leaves. The autumn colors were spectacular, red and gold and orange, and the air smelled like wood smoke and approaching winter. I had brought flowers, yellow roses, that had been her favorite. "Caroline," I said softly, speaking to the stone as if she could hear me. "This is Maria. She's been taking care of our children, and she's been taking care of me too." Maria slipped her hand into mine, her presence warm and solid beside me. "I want you to know that I still love you," I continued, my voice cracking with emotion. "I will always love you. You were my first real love, my partner, the mother of my children. You taught me what love meant, what commitment meant, what family meant. Nothing will ever change that. Nothing will ever diminish what we had." I paused, taking a deep breath. The wind rustled through the trees, shaking loose a shower of golden leaves that fell around us like confetti. "But I think you would want me to be happy. You always wanted me to be happy, even when I was too stubborn to let myself. And Maria makes me happy. She makes Oliver and Sophie happy too. She's not replacing you. No one could ever replace you. But she's helping me live again, helping our children heal. So I hope, wherever you are, you can give us your blessing." A gust of wind swept through the cemetery, stronger than before, rustling the leaves and carrying with it the faintest hint of Caroline's perfume. The perfume she used to wear, the one that lingered on her clothes for months after she died. Or maybe that was just my imagination, my grief conjuring comfort from thin air. Maybe it was just the scent of autumn, of change, of endings and beginnings intertwined. Maria squeezed my hand. "She was beautiful." and she said, looking at the photograph on the headstone. It was one of my favorites, taken at Oliver's 5th birthday party. Caroline laughing at something off camera, her eyes full of joy. I can see Oliver's eyes in her face, the same intelligence, the same kindness. She was kind too, and funny. She had this way of finding humor in everything, even the hard stuff. She would have liked you, I think. You think so? I know so. Caroline always said that the best thing about me was my heart. She would be glad that someone is helping me use it again. We stood there for a while longer, the three of us, 2 living and 1 memory. The sun sank lower in the sky, painting everything in soft golden light. And when we finally left, I felt lighter than I had in years. That night, after the children were asleep, I asked Maria to marry me. It wasn't elaborate. I didn't have a ring or a speech prepared. We were sitting on the couch in the living room, the fireplace crackling, the house quiet and peaceful around us. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, and through the windows, I could see the stars beginning to appear over the lake. Maria, I said, taking her hands in mine, I know it hasn't been very long, and I know there are still things to figure out. Logistics and family and all the practical details that come with blending 2 lives. But I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to raise our children together. I want to grow old with you by my side. Will you marry me? Her eyes filled with tears. Nathan, are you sure? It has only been a year. Maybe we are moving too fast. Maybe we should wait. Make sure this is real. I've never been more sure of anything. When you came into our lives, everything changed. You didn't just take care of my house, Maria. You took care of my heart. You found the broken pieces and started putting them back together. And I don't want to waste another day pretending that what we have is anything less than love. She was quiet for a long moment, and I felt my heart pounding in my chest. Had I moved too fast? Had I misread the situation? Was she going to say no, to tell me we needed more time, to walk back everything we had built? But then she smiled, that beautiful, transformative smile that I had fallen in love with. And she said the word I had been hoping to hear. Yes. We were married the following spring, in a small ceremony in our backyard overlooking the lake. It was exactly the kind of wedding Caroline would have loved. Simple, intimate, surrounded by nature and the people who mattered most. Oliver served as my best man, standing beside me in a suit that made him look suddenly older, more grown up. Sophie and Lucia were bridesmaids, dressed in matching lavender dresses that Sophie had helped pick out. My mother sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Maria's mother flew in from Brazil, along with 2 of her sisters, and they cried even harder than my mother, speaking rapid Portuguese and hugging everyone in sight. The ceremony was simple. We wrote our own vows, speaking from the heart about what we meant to each other, about the unexpected ways love had found us, about the future we were building together. When I came to this country, Maria said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face, I never imagined I would find love again. I thought that chapter of my life was closed. But you taught me that the heart doesn't close. It just waits for the right person to open it again. Nathan, you opened my heart. You gave me hope when I had forgotten what hope felt like. I promise to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you have made me. Maria, I said, my voice rough with emotion, before you came into my life, I was a ghost. I was walking through the world without really living in it. You brought me back. You brought my children back. You taught me that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story, that it can be a chapter that leads to something new. I promise to love you, to cherish you, to support you in all your dreams. I promise to be the husband you deserve, the partner David would have wanted for you, the man I want to become. The children threw flower petals as we walked down the aisle, and the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, and somewhere in the distance, a single bird sang a song that sounded almost like joy. As I stood at the altar, watching Maria walk toward me in a simple white dress, flowers in her hair, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. 1.5 years ago, I had been a ghost, haunting my own life, convinced that happiness was something that had died with Caroline. But then, a housekeeper had decided to bake a cake with my children, and the flour had exploded all over the ceiling, and I had walked into my kitchen to find the most beautiful disaster I had ever seen. I had learned that love isn't about replacing what you've lost. It's about finding the courage to let your heart expand, to make room for new joy without diminishing the old. Caroline would always be a part of me, a part of our family. But Maria had shown me that there was room for more. The heart, it turns out, is infinitely expandable. I love you, I whispered as Maria reached me at the altar. I love you too, she whispered back. And I promised to make flower explosions for the rest of our lives. I laughed, and she laughed, and our children laughed, and somewhere, I like to think, Caroline was laughing too. Because love, real love, doesn't end with death. It transforms, it evolves, it finds new ways to bloom. And sometimes it starts with a housekeeper, a lopsided cake, and flour on the ceiling. Years later, when people ask me about the best decision I ever made, I don't talk about the company I built, or the deals I closed, or the money I earned. I don't talk about the awards on my office wall, or the articles in business magazines, or the net worth that most people would consider extraordinary. I talk about the night I came home sad and found my kitchen covered in flour. I talk about Maria. I talk about the woman who taught me that the heart is not a finite space, but an infinite one. That grief and joy can coexist. That the best way to honor those we have lost is to keep loving, keep living, keep opening ourselves to the possibility of happiness. Our family has grown since then. Maria and I had a daughter together, a little girl named Hope, who has her mother's curly hair and her father's stubborn streak. She is 5 now, the same age Sophie was when her mother died, and she carries with her the legacy of both families, the best of everything we have to offer. Oliver is in college now, studying computer science at Stanford like he always dreamed. He video calls every Sunday, showing us the projects he's working on, the friends he's made, the life he's building. He still carries some sadness, but it's the kind of sadness that makes a person deeper, not darker. He remembers his mother with love, and he loves Maria too, seeing no contradiction in holding both. Sophie is a teenager now, dramatic and wonderful and exhausting in the way that only teenage girls can be. She has her mother's smile and Maria's warmth, a combination that makes everyone who meets her instantly fall in love. She keeps a photo of Caroline on her desk, next to a photo of Maria, honoring both the women who raised her. Lucia is in medical school, making her mother prouder than words can express. She's at Johns Hopkins, at the top of her class, on her way to becoming the surgeon she always dreamed of being. David would be so proud, Maria says sometimes, and I know she's right. I never met the man, but I feel like I know him through the daughter he raised, through the wife he loved, through the legacy he left behind. And Maria and I are still here, still together, still finding new reasons to love each other every day. We've had our challenges, of course, blended families always do. There have been arguments and misunderstandings, moments of doubt and moments of fear. But there has also been so much joy, so much laughter, so much love. Every time I look at her, I feel grateful that she decided to bake a cake that day, that she let our children make a mess, that she showed me what living could look like. The house in Bellevue is no longer a museum. It's a home, a messy, noisy, chaotic, beautiful home filled with laughter and love and the occasional flower explosion. The walls are covered with family photos, some of Caroline, some of David, many of all of us together. The kitchen bears the marks of countless cooking experiments, some successful and some disastrous. The backyard has a swing set and a garden and a spot by the lake where we sit together and watch the sunset, remembering those we've lost and celebrating what we've found. Because that's what Maria taught me. That's what the children taught me. That's what Caroline, in her own way, taught me too. Life is short. Love is precious. And sometimes, the best things happen when you least expect them, in the most unlikely packages, covered in chocolate and flour. So if you're out there, wondering if it's possible to love again after loss, wondering if happiness can find you when you've given up looking, I want you to know, it can. You just have to be open to seeing it. You just have to let the flower land on the ceiling. You just have to believe that the best chapter of your story might still be waiting to be written. Mine was. And I'm so grateful I was paying attention when it began. I remember sometimes that evening when I pulled into my driveway, sad and empty and convinced that my life was essentially over. I remember thinking that the sunset was mocking me, that beauty no longer applied to my existence. I remember dreading walking into my silent house, facing another evening of going through the motions. And then I opened the door and heard laughter. That's the thing about love. You can't plan for it. You can't schedule it into your calendar or add it to your to-do list. It arrives on its own terms, in its own time, often when you've stopped looking for it. It finds you in the mess, in the chaos, in the moments when you're least expecting anything to change. Maria found me when I was lost. She didn't try to fix me or save me or solve me. She just saw me. She saw the grief and the pain and the walls I had built, and she didn't run away. She made flower explosions and sunflower arrangements and taught my children to bake terrible cakes. She played Brazilian music and told stories about her grandmother and reminded me that the world still contained beauty. And slowly, without my even noticing at first, she brought me back to life. I think about David sometimes, Maria's first husband. I think about how he must have loved her, how he would feel knowing that his family found happiness again after his death. I hope he would be glad. I hope he would see how much I love Maria, how much I love Lucia, how hard I try to honor the legacy he left behind. I hope that wherever he is, he knows that his wife and daughter are cherished, protected, loved. And I think about Caroline, of course. I think about her every day. I see her in Oliver's thoughtful expressions, in Sophie's bright laughter, in the sunset over the lake that she loved so much. I visit her grave regularly, bringing flowers, telling her about our lives. I like to think she can hear me. I like to think she's happy for us. Because that's what love does. It wants the best for the people we care about, even after we're gone. It wants them to be happy, to be loved, to be surrounded by joy. Caroline loved me enough to want that for me, and I finally loved myself enough to accept it. So here I am, 15 years after a truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and changed everything. Here I am, with a wife who makes me laugh every day, with children who have grown into remarkable young people, with a family I never expected to have. Here I am, grateful for every moment, cherishing every memory, looking forward to every tomorrow. The kitchen still gets messy sometimes. Sophie, though she's a teenager now, still occasionally helps Maria bake cakes that come out lopsided and covered in too much frosting. Hope, our youngest, has inherited her older sister's enthusiasm and her mother's love of cooking, which means flour on the ceiling is not entirely a thing of the past. I wouldn't have it any other way, because those messes, those beautiful disasters, are what life is made of. They're the evidence that we're living, really living, not just existing. They're the proof that we've chosen joy over safety, love over fear, hope over certainty. And that's the best decision I ever made. Not the company, not the money, not any of the things the world considers success. Just this, letting flour land on my ceiling and choosing to laugh instead of scold. Opening my heart when I thought it was permanently closed. Believing that love could find me again, even when I had given up looking. That's it. That's the whole secret. Love is everywhere, waiting to be noticed. Happiness is possible, even after loss. The heart has infinite capacity for joy. You just have to be brave enough to let it in. You just have to be willing to make a mess, and trust me, the cleanup is worth it.